Hello everybody, Adam Lusek here, and today I will be providing a follow-up to the Pulse Read series comparing 6 additional models and their output in the grand scheme of the Pulse Read project. To provide a little context, if you haven't seen the first 2 videos, which I will be linking in the description below, and to show how I'm comparing these models, let's just talk about that very briefly. So the one-liner of Pulse Read is it's a project that I've been working on that takes social media posts and does automatic analysis with language models on the comments. It's a bit of a social listening, social media analysis, marketing kind of approach, and seeing if these language models have any merit in doing some of this analysis automatically and on their own. So in the first video, we go over all the prompts and then actually extracting all of these comments here, so I won't dig too deep into that. And then in the second video here, for 6 model analysis, we'll go over GPT-4 Turbo, GPT-3.5 Turbo, Gemini Pro, Gemini Ultra, Mistral Medium, and Llama 2, the 7 billion parameter option. We compare all of the outputs there and rank them, but since then, there's been a lot of different announcements. A lot of models have been getting released. We've seen Anthropic release Claude, Mistral release Mistral Large, and then Google release things like Gemma, their 7 billion open source parameter, or 7 billion parameter open source model. And so I wanted to provide an additional follow-up going over how these models, some of the newer ones, and then some returning favorites that we've seen perform as well. So to talk a little bit about the different analyses that we'll be putting these language models through, I first start with a discussion themes analysis where it'll take all of the comments and then extract all of the discussion themes from within them, listing them out neatly. I then move on to a commonality analysis where I ask it to identify common topics being talked about and then group together sort of examples from the comments directly of what's happening and what's actually being talked about. I then have a bit of a challenge with the overall analysis where it'll go over, provide an overall reaction, identify key themes and insights, and then I asked for recommendations for future posts to tailor towards the more positive reactions of the comments. So this one's a bit more of a challenge as we're asking the language models to do multiple things at once, but it's a great thing to compare the different outputs to. And then finally, on another page, I have a sentiment analysis where we go over each of these comments and then provide positive, negative, or neutral sentiment. Without further ado, let's take a look at the next 6 model candidates and then dive into their different analyses. So I'll be looking today at Mistral Large, Mixtral 8x7b, Llama 2, the 70 billion parameter option, Gemma, Claude 3 Opus, and Claude 3 Sonnet. So let's go ahead and start with Mistral Large on the discussion themes analysis. And Mistral Large did a very good job here, I feel. Very comparable, I would say, to things like Gemini Ultra and GPT-4 Turbo that we went over in the previous video, but it was able to provide a little bit more nuanced discussion themes and then provide really good descriptors then of the actual discussion themes themselves. So very happy to see that it can pull out things like the role of tools and technology, and then say a few comments mention the importance of having the right tools and technology, but also stress the need for proper training to use these tools effectively. So really liking this from Mistral Large. Good output as always from the Mistral team. Moving on to Mixtral 8x7b, and I do love a mixture of experts model, especially one here, which is using 8 7 billion parameter models to try and attempt the task. What we saw here was not as robust as the Mistral Large model, but it still does grab the main discussion themes, things like diverse teams, creativity and freedom, risk-taking culture, and then provide a little bit of a follow-up as to why it's saying that. So for risk-taking culture, it says several comments highlight the need for a culture that is open to taking risks and accepting that not all innovative efforts will be successful. So Mixtral did a pretty decent job. Didn't get as nuanced in the actual themes and the descriptions as Mistral Large, but still perfectly usable. I would say it's comparable to things like Mistral Medium over here, and not necessarily the larger models like Large, Ultra, and GPT-4 Turbo over here. However, still pretty good. Llama 2 70b only provided the main lines of the discussion themes, so it says things like innovation is driven by frustration, not necessity. Innovation can come from anyone, regardless of their position or background. Providing employees with the tools and resources they need to innovate is important. So I would say this is relatively lackluster. I would like to see a little bit more specific themes per se, and a little bit of a better description of this than just diverse teams with different perspectives and expertise can lead to innovative solutions. Mistral Large takes that in a different direction by saying diverse teams and collaboration. Comments discuss the importance of diverse teams and collaboration, both within and between companies, to maximize innovation and apply proven knowledge across different fields. That's a little bit more in depth than just saying, diverse teams with different perspectives and expertise can lead to innovative solutions. Still usable, I would say. Certainly a little bit more on the comparison side to things like Mistral Medium, applying proven technologies, comments looking for other fields, all that stuff that we've been over, but not as in-depth. And still, Mixtral is providing a little bit more substance here, but Llama 2 7dB is really synthesizing it down into very succinct lines. So still usable, but not as interesting, I would say, as things like Mistral Large. Moving on to Gemma, the 7 billion parameter open source model from Google. I was very impressed with its ability to actually output this much, given it was running just on my laptop for inference, and the quality that it actually gives here is pretty damn good, given that it's a 7 billion parameter model. I mean, we've seen things like Llama 2, the 7 billion parameter model, really not give me great output here, saying things that are like very general, very top level, and not exactly what I'm looking for. But Gemma, and oops, looks like I moved this picture over accidentally. There we go, that lines up all nice now. Gemma was able to give some really good discussion themes that they have here in bold, things like the importance of process. And having an efficient process allows for the time and resources to focus on innovation, problem solving, and creativity. Problems in existing processes provide the impetus for innovation, and creativity is key to finding solutions. So I'd say it's a good middle ground between things like the large models and then the smaller models, which is really impressive to see Gemma coming in with more of like a middle of the pack output on only 7 billion parameters. So super impressed with this, and I find that this is the good mix of sort of more nuanced takes with those good succinct descriptions as well. So happy to see that from Gemma. Moving on to the new models from Anthropic coming out as of recording this only 2 days ago. We see what I feel to be a little lackluster on the actual output here. Opus, their very expensive and big model, was able to give, and within these lines, I think the lines are really good. So things like applying proven knowledge and expertise from different fields to maximize existing resources and technologies, providing space, time, and freedom for employees to think, reflect, and discuss new ideas. Really good lines. I would certainly prefer, if it's going to have to be something smaller like this, I would prefer Claude 3's output over like Llama 2's, but still it doesn't give the more detailed description like things like Mistral Large is giving here. And then Sonnet is also just a little bit of what Claude 3 Opus was doing. However, I would say less specific, not as interesting per se as what Opus was able to put here. So interesting to see when comparing just Anthropic's models together. They provided very similar output and form, but Opus was able to go a little bit more in depth given the limited space that it output, whereas Sonnet does take a little bit more of that generalized approach, things like fostering an innovative culture and mindset within the organization. Of course, we would know that that is literally what the post is about, but then Opus is able to really take that and provide the more specific outputs. So not too impressed with Claude 3's Sonnet, but Opus was pretty okay for its limited theme analysis, and then all of the other ones performed pretty well. Llama 2, not as impressed with that one, but still happy to see the outcome. To update my rankings then with where this model output falls in the discussion themes category and how in line specifically it was for what I was looking for, this is what I ended up coming up with. So at the top of the pack, first 1 through 4, we see these very large models really still performing and outperforming the middle of the road or the smaller parameter models. Things like GPT-4 Turbo and Gemini Ultra still really giving me that good quality output for the discussion themes, but then things like Mistral Large also provided very comparable output, which was great to see. And then I was still impressed with Claude 3 Opus's ability to do this succinct but still very nuanced, very specific discussion theme extraction here. Middle of the road then is where we're starting to see things like Gemma, Mistral Medium, Sonnet, and Mixtral really take place. They're still usable, but as I, have said many times in the past, didn't necessarily go that extra mile. Once again, still super impressed with Gemma's output in this one. I thought this was really good, especially given the size of the model. So operating cost for this, super low. Output quality, super high. Love to see that. Bottom is then still things like Llama 2, not really giving me exactly what I'm looking for. And then in the last video, we went over this, but 3.5 Turbo and Gemini Pro really didn't go the extra mile or give me anything super in-depth for what I was looking for. So they still fall to the bottom here. So this is where I finally end up with my personal rankings for these models. So let's move on to the commonality analysis. And so right off the bat, Mistral Large provided a very good commonality, I would say. It gave me 3 major themes and then provided very direct examples from the comments of when this is being discussed. So this is simply in line with things like Mistral Medium. So good to see that Mistral's keeping on this track. But still, the one thing that I don't necessarily like from Mistral Large is that it only gave me 3 overarching topics. I liked that Mistral Medium gave me 4 and then actually stated in a disclaimer down here that there were additional topics, what they were, however they weren't being talked about as much, whereas Mistral Large, I feel, may have generalized a little bit here with their topics. So would like to see that go a little bit more in depth, but still phenomenal job at actually grouping together these comments. Mixtral, on the other hand, did not. It gave me, once again, what we've been seeing with a lot of the smaller models and stuff like Gemini Pro. It gave me more of a discussion theme analysis, which is not exactly what I was looking for. So not a great output from Mixtral for what I was looking for, but still, decent if you want to add it on to the discussion themes here. Llama 2 gives me a bit of a middle ground here. I really like that it provides 5 overarching discussion themes, and then it directly states indexed comments. So I like that it says, several comments mention the importance of leadership and management and fostering innovation. For example, comment 1 states strong support from leadership that train, empower, and encourage their team to work effectively within their organization. So it's providing good examples here, and it's pulling out those themes. I would like to see more examples similar to how Mistral Large is doing here. However, perfectly adequate, and it's a good middle ground between, nothing at all and then maybe too much per se. Gemma provided some really good stuff as well. So constantly blown away by Gemma. The unfortunate part is that it's definitely limited in its output and doing all of these complex tasks all at once. We can see that here at the end it goes off with saying the key is the most of the problem and the need to make the most of the most. Couldn't have said it better myself, Gemma, but as we see here in these first 4 themes, it grabs some good themes and then it does actually directly quote the comments. So cool to see that it's able to take those and provide direct references with these themes as well. Unfortunately, it's just limited with its interface and with its output. Moving on to Anthropics, Claude 3 Opus gave me a very similar output, I would say, to Mistral Large, in that it gave me 3 overarching themes and then just directly listed out the comments underneath them. I would say that, very similar reports to what I was saying with Mistral Large. I would like to see more discussion themes as more things and more nuanced discussion was actually happening within this comment section. But it did effectively, pull out these themes and then group together the comments. So still good in going towards what I was looking for, but I would like to see it a little bit more closer to that, that beautiful Mistral medium output that we got earlier. Claude 3 Sonnet, actually, then, I would say, is more in line with what I was looking for. It gave me 5 overarching themes, and then a little short descriptor, plus some of those actual examples here from the comments. So, really liked Claude 3 Sonnet's output here. Funny to see that it's more in line with what I was looking for than Claude 3 Opus, but, still, as with a lot of this stuff, super subjective. So I really like Sonnet for this task in comparison to Claude 3 Opus. To update then my personal ranking for output on the commonality analysis, I still think Mistral Medium takes the cake with great discussion themes, phenomenal examples, and this lovely disclaimer claiming, all the different topics, but then also saying that they weren't as discussed as frequently as the ones listed above. So for which one I would like to use, I would want to use Mistral Medium's output the most of these for my personal use. Then, top of the pack, we see a lot of these larger models, the Gemini Ultras, the GPT-4 Turbos. I like GPT-4 Turbo. I like its sub-themes that it actually puts here with the examples. And then Gemini Ultra does this great thing where it takes parts of the comments, references the index underneath the themes as well. We start getting down a little bit into the middle. Claude 3 Sonnet also gave me really good comparison to things like Mistral Medium right here. But then Opus and Mistral Large were very comparable as well. Not as specific as I was looking for, so that's why they sort of ranked a little bit in the middle, but pretty decent output, all things considered. We then see some of the smaller models going down, which, follows suit to what we were seeing with the discussion themes ranking. Things like Gemma and Llama 270B and, GPT 3.5 Turbo starting to be more middle of the pack. And then, of course, things like Mixtral, Gemini Pro, and Llama 7B, which don't even provide any great examples, and it's just more of a extended discussion theme analysis pulling up at the bottom. So this is where, for the commonality section of this, my personal ranking lies. All right, so let's take a look now at the challenge round, the overall analysis. In this part, just to go over it again real quick, this is where we are putting the language models really through the test. They're going to have to give me the overall reaction, key insights and takeaways, and then also suggest future posts given the positive reactions from the comments. So starting over here with Mistral Large, really happy with its overall analysis. It does some really great things like directly referencing comments to bolster its claims and its arguments. Right here we say that they noted that leaders must create a culture that allows ideas to flow freely, empowers employees to take risks, and provides the necessary resources and support. For example, one user commented, "Innovation is enabled when leadership creates an environment where ideas aren't stifled and mistakes are allowed." So phenomenal to see that it's able to provide that very nuanced take with some good backing up examples. Pops up some other good stuff here. Noted that even the most diverse and creative teams will struggle to innovate if they do not have access to the necessary resources and support. Now let's take a look at its suggestions for future posts. One of the things it says is emphasize the importance of leadership by highlighting examples of leaders who have successfully created and provide tips and best practices for how other leaders can do the same. Pretty decent suggestion. Celebrate diversity in its role of innovation, share the stories and how they achieved breakthrough innovations, highlight the unique perspectives and strengths that each team member brought to the table. Also a pretty solid idea. Providing the resources and trainings to help teams innovate more effectively. Share tips and best practices for how teams can use the latest tools and technologies to drive innovation, provide the training and support. Not as great, I would say, for a social media post. And then also this one here at the end is just ask open-ended questions and encourage users to engage in thoughtful discussions. So first two here, really strong. Last two, a little bit mid, but still overall good analysis coming out of Mistral Large. Looking at the mixture of experts model over here from Mistral, its younger sibling per se, we see that it was able to succinctly summarize sort of the 5 key takeaways from the discussions, things like leadership, with comments emphasizing the importance of supportive leadership, creativity and freedom, necessity and frustration. Original post argues that this is actually not true. I never even, put in the original post. So seeing that a little bit inaccurate with some of these overall analyses. Let's look at its social media post overall strategy. Share stories of leaders who have successfully fostered a culture of innovation. It's decent, but not the best. Encourage audience to value creativity and freedom in their work. Also, not really a great tip for a social media post. Share best practices for building diverse teams. Not super specific, but could be used for a post. Conduct further research and share insights. That's always a good one as well. Highlight humility and other enablers. Share tips and resources. So a little bit lacking, I would say, on the strategy and social media recommendations from this. And then also a little bit inaccurate somewhat in the overall analysis, but a decent attempt overall from the Mixtral team. Llama 2, 70B, the 70 billion parameter model. What we see here is it also provides some good 5 takeaways here. Very much so taking the prompts literally with listing all this stuff out. Goes through and says, comments emphasize frustration and necessity as key drivers of innovation. Comments suggest that innovation is often a response to a problem or restriction. It can be driven by identifying a problem that needs to be solved or finding ways to work within the limitations. Not too bad. Taking a look at its recommendations then, we see it says, highlight the importance of diversity, share examples of successful diverse teams and their innovative solutions. Once again, very, high level, not super specific post thing there. Share stories of innovation that resulted from frustration or necessity. Also still not as specific as I would like. Highlight the qualities that made leadership effective in fostering innovation. Decent suggestion there, actually. Discuss the role of culture, share examples of organizations. Still not as great. Emphasize how constraints can sometimes drive creativity and innovation. Decent post suggestions. Really like this middle one of highlighting the qualities. I think that's a good idea, but overall still not super, super up there like the couple that we were getting from Mistral Large. Gemma, unfortunately, we see here that it then runs again into its output limitations with being such a small model. It starts out real strong, listing out some good key takeaways from the main discussion themes. This gives an overall sort of thing here. That discussion showcased common theme, need for a conducive environment, and mindset. But then it tailors off when it starts to hit its output max and say things like, the key is the key to the solving problems and challenges. And then in conclusion, organization and innovation and creativity and innovation. Speak your truth, Gemma 7B. Let's take a look now at the Claude 3 Opus and Claude 3 Sonnet suite from our friends over at Anthropic. Looking at Claude 3 Opus, the largest model, which is supposed to have excellent reasoning skills, we can see that it gives a good overall reaction, saying that the post is positive, many commenters engaging in thoughtful dialogue and sharing their perspectives. Some of the key themes that came out here, leadership and culture, highlighted the importance of creating a culture, some of these good themes. And then let's take a look at the real challenge, which it appears that not a lot of these models have a good time doing, is giving some very specific insights into tailoring future social media posts. All right. Highlight real-world examples of innovative leadership and culture within your organizations. Share stories of how supportive leaders have empowered their team. Stories are a bit more specific than just saying highlight importance of, or share stories of, things like that, which, still not the best of what I'm looking for. Emphasize the importance of providing the right tools, training, and processes to support effective teamwork among the diversity of teams. that's a pretty decent one. I like that it went the extra mile of saying some of the things you could highlight there, so decent suggestion, a little bit better than the first. Specific challenges or problems that we're working to solve through innovation and invite followers to share their own experience and ideas for tackling similar issues. That's a pretty good suggestion. Celebrating the successes of employees who have been given the freedom and autonomy to innovate within their roles and sharing how that approach has led to breakthrough ideas and solutions. Also a really good one. So very decent overall, and then some mediocre, but also some real bangers in here for the actual post suggestions. So overall, Claude 3 Opus, not too bad. Sonnet, on the other hand, we see here that already the actionable takeaways and insights is not great. This is just giving me a lot of the organizational things that we were seeing in some of these prior models like Gemini Pro, where it told me to focus on creating a culture of frustration. And then like Gemini Ultra, where it's giving me very just, baseline things of how to make social media posts. It totally didn't pick up that I wanted specific things like that. So it just gave me some very general organizational tips and tricks. Its overall analysis on the key themes are still pretty decent, as it does succinctly take things like this and elaborate a little bit more on it, but also keeps it nice there. So to update my personal rankings for the overall analysis, I still think GPT-4 Turbo took a very, very good direct approach, broke it down real nice here with the overall reaction, the key themes and insights, and then some pretty good recommendations for future posts with some pretty decent, suggestions of how to actually put those together. I thought Claude 3 Opus did a similarly good job with putting this all together and then giving some more specified stuff, just not quite at the level that GPT-4 Turbo is able to do. And then a few of those larger ones like Mistral Large and Mixtral sort of also coming up to the top, giving some good examples of actual posts that could be used, and then a good succinct analysis of the actual comments. And the reason that, their outputs aren't necessarily like Mixtral 7B or 8x7B is not exactly what I'm looking for. We had a lot of models not do great. So the ones here sort of towards the bottom are where we're starting to see things like, Gemini Pro and Gemini Ultra and Sonnet over here totally missed the mark, and actually, and especially Llama 2 7B, totally missed the mark in giving me those good recommendations for future posts. So it's very top heavy and actually being able to follow the instructions. But then I would say the first three are where we see the best output there. So this is sort of how I ended up ranking it personally for my specific use case. As for the sentiment analysis, really what we're looking here and what we determined last time is that it's really not great to rely on exactly one model for sort of a best model for sentiment analysis. I would say that pretty much none of them fully agree with each other on the full sentiment of a specific comment. So it's useful then really to take more of an aggregate score using multiple models and then putting that together to determine sort of more of a true sentiment afterward. It's really not, we're not seeing super consistency in actually these more positive comments being fully labeled as positive across the board. However, this makes a lot of sense, as there can be, a wide range of sentiment, like slightly positive, slightly negative, very positive in the case of like this one, or very negative in the case of this one. And so taking those multiple opinions is sort of the best approach. If we look, however, at the spread from the new models that we added in, so it starts with Gemma 7B and then goes across, there's really nothing super out of the ordinary. I would say it looks like Mistral Large is heavily favoring the neutral position, whereas Claude 3 Sonnet is more like, Gemini Pro, and that it's labeling a lot more things as positive. And then Llama 2 70B, thankfully, is not performing as horrifically as Llama 2 7B did for me, and provided some good range of sentiment here. So, as you can see, these all differ. Really, the only one I wouldn't use is Llama 2, the 7 billion parameter one. And of course, we get a more robust output when looking at most of them all at once. To highlight an outlier that I found, we see that Llama 2 actually labeled this comment as positive, when the general consensus is that it was mostly negative. So not sure exactly why Llama 2 is doing that. And then we see like sort of towards the middle here, this could go either way, but GPT 3.5 Turbo labeled this comment as negative. However, there seems to be, a good split of actually positive versus neutral versus negative. Oops. When we zoom out for the entire view with not too many outliers. So that leads me to, once again, want to more so focus on this final aggregate score that you can get when combining the sentiment output of multiple models. So to give an overall sort of reaction and conclusion to this model comparison, and there will definitely be more to come as more models are released and I get access to them. But at the end of the day, it's super interesting, I feel, how subjective these models actually are. A lot of them we saw performed differently on different tasks. I really like GPT-4 Turbo for the discussion themes and GPT-4 Turbo for the overall analysis, but then I preferred things like Mistral Medium for the commonality analysis. We do see a lot of these larger models sticking to the top, the Claude 3 Opuses, the Mistral Larges, the Gemini Ultras, GPT-4 Turbo. They tend to be performing and outperforming a lot of the smaller or a lot of the open source models. But there's also some interesting things here too, with things like Gemma making its way up to the middle of the pack by giving some pretty decent output sometimes here on a very small scale. So really at the end of the day, I would say that there's some clear models that give better output than the others, and they tend to be a lot of the larger ones, but it really comes down to your specific use case. So all of these, of course, are ranked based on what I would prefer the output to be for my pulse read project. And so that's sort of how I am ranking these. Not anything super empirical, all super subjective, which I believe is a good way sort of actually using these models. Since really at the end of the day, when you're putting this stuff into production, it's a lot harder to, really rely on one specific model or rely on the one specific platform. So hope this gave you all some good insights into some of the newer models and their output comparison in the context of my specific project. Thanks for watching.